The massive crystalline spire of the Galactic Council headquarters gleamed against the backdrop of three suns, casting prismatic rainbows across the assembled delegates from 47 different species. Ambassador Thexera of the Zilithian Empire adjusted her ceremonial robes, her four eyes scanning the circular chamber where decisions affecting trillions of lives were made daily. Today's agenda contained only one item, but it was perhaps the most controversial debate in the Council's 8,000-year history. Humanity. The newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel had been observed for exactly 3 Earth years, and the reports were disturbing. Unlike every other spacefaring civilization that had joined the Council through careful negotiation and cultural exchange, humans had simply appeared in the galactic community like a force of nature. Their ships were crude but effective, their technology was primitive yet innovative, and their behavior was utterly unpredictable. The motion before us today, announced High Counselor Vax through his species' natural telepathic broadcasting, concerns the immediate containment and regulation of the species known as humans from the planet designated Earth 3. The emergency session has been called due to mounting evidence of their aggressive expansion and complete disregard for established galactic law. A ripple of agreement passed through the chamber. The Kethmori delegate, a towering insectoid being, clicked her mandibles in obvious agitation. In the past standard year alone, human vessels have violated the borders of 17 different systems. They claim to be exploring but refuse to acknowledge territorial sovereignty. Their mining operations strip entire asteroid fields without environmental impact assessments. They are a plague upon organized space. Ambassador Thexera nodded slowly. Her own people had encountered human ships near the Zilithian outer colonies. The humans had been polite enough, even friendly, but they had asked uncomfortable questions about resource allocation and population density. When informed that the 3 habitable worlds in the system supported only 12 million Zilithians due to careful ecological balance, the human captain had looked confused. Why so few? The human had asked through their crude translation device. These worlds could support billions with proper development. The memory still sent shivers down Thexera's spine. The casual way the human had suggested reshaping entire worlds, as if planets were merely tools to be optimized, reflected a mindset that terrified most galactic species. Humans seemed to view the universe as something to be conquered rather than carefully maintained. We have attempted diplomatic contact, continued the Kethmori delegate. However, humans do not appear to have a unified government. Their planet is divided into hundreds of competing factions, each with different laws, customs, and objectives. How does one negotiate with a species that cannot even agree among themselves? This was indeed the crux of the problem. Every other species in the Council had achieved spaceflight only after unifying their homeworld under a single government or confederation. It was considered a basic requirement for galactic citizenship. How could a species be trusted with interstellar responsibilities if they couldn't even manage their own planet peacefully? High Counselor Vax's mental voice carried overtones of deep concern. Intelligence reports suggest that humans are not merely divided, but actively hostile toward one another. They have developed weapons capable of sterilizing their entire planet multiple times over, yet they continue to build more. Their history is an endless cycle of warfare, conquest, and destruction. Perhaps, interjected a delegate from the Peaceful Harmony Collective, this is precisely why they require guidance. Many young species go through violent phases before achieving enlightenment. The Council's purpose has always been to nurture developing civilizations toward peace and prosperity. The suggestion was met with skeptical silence. The Harmony Collective was known for their optimism, but even they seemed uncertain about humanity's potential for peaceful development. Ambassador Thexera finally stood to address the chamber. Honored colleagues, I have reviewed all available data on human civilization. Their violence is indeed unprecedented, but so is their ingenuity. In less than 100 years, they progressed from primitive flight to faster-than-light travel. Their technological advancement rate exceeds that of any known species by a factor of 10. She paused, allowing the implications to sink in. If we do nothing, humans will likely develop technology that surpasses our own within decades. If we attempt to subjugate them, we risk war with a species that seems to excel at warfare. I propose a third option, controlled integration. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of mental voices, chirps, clicks, and harmonic tones as delegates argued among themselves. The very idea of controlled integration was controversial. The Council had never before attempted to forcibly guide a species' development. Their traditional approach was to observe until a species demonstrated readiness for peaceful contact, then gradually introduce them to galactic society. Integration implies equality, the Kethmori delegate objected. This species has demonstrated no capacity for peaceful coexistence. They strip worlds bare, pollute star systems with their industrial waste, and show no respect for the careful balance that has maintained galactic peace for millennia. High Counselor Vax raised a crystalline appendage for silence. The proposal has merit, but it raises serious questions about implementation. How does one control a species that refuses to be controlled? Ambassador Thexera had been preparing for this question. Economic pressure. Humans require resources to fuel their expansion: rare metals, exotic matter, energy sources. The Council controls access to the galaxy's most valuable systems. We offer them a choice: accept our guidance and gain access to resources beyond their imagination, or remain isolated on their small cluster of primitive worlds. And if they refuse, ask the delegate from the ethereal dominion, their voice a whisper of harmonized frequencies. Then, we enforce the isolation. No human ship leaves their designated sector. No trade, no contact, no expansion. Their civilization will stagnate and, eventually collapse under its own contradictions. The proposal was elegant in its simplicity. Humans needed the galaxy more than the galaxy needed humans. By controlling access to resources and trade routes, the Council could essentially trap humanity in a cage of their own making. Eventually, faced with the choice between stagnation and submission, they would accept Council oversight. High Counselor Vax's mental voice carried a note of approval. The economic quarantine has precedent. We used similar measures to guide the Vertex Consortium toward peaceful resolution of their civil wars. However, humans may prove more resistant than the Vertex. Then, we make the pressure more severe, the Kethmori delegate suggested with obvious satisfaction. Cut off all their trade routes. Destroy any human ship that ventures beyond their borders. Make the consequences of defiance so severe that even their violent nature will force them to comply. Ambassador Thexera felt a flutter of unease. The delegate's words carried an undertone of genuine hostility. Many Council species had developed an almost instinctive fear of humanity based on intelligence reports. The humans' casual attitude toward violence and destruction triggered deep evolutionary anxieties in species that had spent millennia evolving past their own aggressive phases. We must be careful, Thexera warned. Intelligence suggests that humans respond to threats with increasing aggression. If we push too hard, we may trigger exactly the kind of violent response we're trying to prevent. Let them rage, the Kethmori delegate clicked dismissively. What can one primitive species do against the combined might of 47 advanced civilizations? Their ships are crude, their weapons are basic, and they lack any understanding of galactic-scale warfare. The vote proceeded with little additional debate. 39 species voted in favor of economic quarantine with enforcement provisions. 5 species abstained, including the Harmony Collective. Only 3 species voted against the measure, a faction of younger civilizations who expressed concern about the precedent of forcibly containing a sovereign species. High Counselor Vax's mental broadcast carried the weight of official decree. By majority vote, Resolution 4471 is hereby enacted. Effective immediately, all human vessels are restricted to the Sol system and its immediate neighbors. Any human ship detected beyond the designated boundary will be warned once, then disabled or destroyed. All trade with human colonies is suspended indefinitely. Ambassador Thexera voted with the majority, but she felt no satisfaction in the decision. Something about the humans troubled her on a level deeper than mere policy disagreement. Their rapid technological advancement, their seemingly limitless adaptability, their absolute refusal to accept limitations, these traits were unprecedented in galactic history. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Thexera accessed her personal data terminal to review the latest intelligence reports from human space. What she found made her 4 eyes widen in surprise. In the 3 days since the Council had begun debating the human question, Earth's governments had apparently detected the surveillance networks monitoring their space. Rather than attempting to hide or negotiate, they had responded by accelerating their expansion efforts. 17 new colony ships had launched in the past 72 hours, more than had launched in the previous 6 months combined. More troubling still, preliminary scans suggested these ships carried cargo manifests unlike anything seen before. Where previous human colonization efforts had focused on establishing sustainable settlements, these new ships appeared to be carrying industrial equipment designed for rapid resource extraction and weapons manufacturing. It was as if humanity had somehow detected the impending quarantine and was racing to establish a foothold beyond their designated borders before enforcement began. Ambassador Thexera stared at the data for several long moments, a cold certainty settling in her minds. The Council had just declared war on a species that seemed to excel at preparing for war. She only hoped that their confidence in the outcome was justified, because she was beginning to suspect that they had seriously underestimated just how dangerous humans could be when threatened. The crystalline spire of the Council headquarters continued to gleam in the light of 3 suns, but somehow the rainbows it cast seemed less beautiful than before. They looked more like warnings of the storm that was coming. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the UES Defiant, watching as the last of the evacuation ships disappeared into hyperspace. The sight should have been reassuring, another successful extraction of human civilians from the outer colonies before the Council's deadline expired. Instead, she felt only a cold fury that had been building for 3 weeks since the ultimatum arrived. The message had been delivered simultaneously to every human government, corporation, and military installation with faster-than-light communication capability. Its contents were simple and insulting: humanity would restrict itself to the Sol system and accept Galactic Council oversight, or face appropriate consequences. No negotiation, no discussion of terms, no acknowledgement that humans might have legitimate interests beyond their home system. Commander, called Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station, were receiving final confirmation from the Kepler station evacuation fleet. All civilian personnel are clear of the restricted zone. Chen nodded without taking her eyes off the starfield. Kepler station had been humanity's most successful deep space colony, a thriving research outpost and mining facility that had supported nearly 50,000 people. Now it was empty except for the automated defense systems that had been installed during the evacuation. Any word from the diplomatic mission to the Council headquarters? She asked. Rodriguez shook his head. Ambassador Williams hasn't been allowed to address the Council directly. They're treating our entire delegation as unauthorized representatives of an unrecognized government. Apparently, they still refuse to believe that the United Earth Coalition speaks for all human factions. This was perhaps the most infuriating aspect of the entire situation. The Council insisted that humanity needed to unify under a single world government before they could be taken seriously, while simultaneously refusing to recognize the unified government that humanity had actually created. The United Earth Coalition represented over 90% of human population and industrial capacity, but the Council dismissed it as merely one faction among many. Commander, interrupted Chief Engineer Martinez, emerging from the maintenance shaft that connected the observation deck to the ship's primary systems. I've got good news and better news. The good news is that all our modifications are complete and tested. The better news is that they work even better than the simulations predicted. Chen finally turned from the viewport, fixing Martinez with her full attention. Show me. Martinez activated a holographic display that filled the center of the observation deck. The image showed a detailed schematic of the Defiant, but the ship looked radically different from its original configuration. Where once there had been comfortable crew quarters and spacious cargo bays, now every available cubic meter was packed with weapons systems, armor plating, and exotic matter reactors. We've managed to increase our firepower by 300% while maintaining full mobility, Martinez explained with obvious pride. The new armor can absorb directed energy weapons up to Class 7, and the reactive plating should handle most projectile weapons. But the real breakthrough is the new engine configuration. The hologram shifted to show the ship's propulsion system, which had been completely redesigned around a cluster of small but incredibly powerful reactors. By using multiple smaller drives instead of one large one, we can maintain faster-than-light capability even if we lose up to 60% of our engine capacity. More importantly, we can change direction and velocity while in hyperspace. Chen raised an eyebrow. I thought that was impossible. So did everyone else. Turns out it just requires some very creative engineering and a complete disregard for manufacturer safety recommendations. Martinez's grin was distinctly predatory. The Council's intelligence reports say human ships are crude and primitive. They're about to discover how wrong they are. The modifications to the Defiant were being replicated across the entire human fleet. In the 3 weeks since the ultimatum, human shipyards had worked around the clock to retrofit every available vessel for combat. Cargo ships became stealth raiders, research vessels became electronic warfare platforms, and even passenger liners were converted into troop transports bristling with weapons. The transformation wasn't limited to existing ships. Human industrial capacity, no longer constrained by the need to maintain civilian infrastructure in the outer colonies, had been redirected toward a single goal: building the largest and most advanced fleet in human history. The shipyards in Earth orbit were launching new vessels every 6 hours, each one incorporating lessons learned from captured alien technology and human innovation. Commander, Rodriguez called out again, "We're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Harrison. The Council enforcement fleet has reached the boundary zone." Chen moved to the command console, accepting the encrypted communication link. Admiral Harrison's weathered face appeared on the screen, his expression grim but determined. "Sarah, our scouts report 68 Council ships moving toward the Kepler system. Mixed fleet composition, looks like they brought representatives from most of their major military powers. They're maintaining formation and broadcasting warnings for any human ships to withdraw immediately." "What are your orders, sir?" Harrison's smile was distinctly unpleasant. "The orders are simple: show them why it was a mistake to threaten humanity. The evacuation phase is complete. As of now, we are implementing Protocol 7. Chen felt a chill of anticipation. Protocol 7 had been developed in absolute secrecy by the Coalition's military leadership, and its existence was known only to senior commanders. The protocol represented humanity's answer to the Council's ultimatum, and it was designed to send a message that would resonate throughout the galaxy. "Understood, Admiral. The Defiant is ready to execute. Good hunting, Commander. Make them remember why humans are dangerous." The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with her crew and the knowledge that they were about to make history. She activated the ship's intercom system, addressing the 200 souls who had volunteered for what everyone understood might be a suicide mission. "This is the Commander. As of now, we are at war with the Galactic Council. They demanded that humanity submit to their authority and accept permanent containment. Our response begins now." She paused, looking out at the starfield where the distant points of light represented worlds inhabited by trillions of aliens who had never experienced war as humans understood it. "The Council believes that we are primitive and crude. They think our technology is inferior and our tactics are predictable. They are about to discover that human ingenuity, when properly motivated, is the most dangerous force in the universe. Today, we teach the galaxy a lesson that will not be forgotten." The Defiant's engines came online with a sound like controlled thunder, and the ship began its approach toward the Council fleet. Around them, nearly 1,000 other human vessels were executing similar maneuvers, converging on the enforcement fleet from multiple directions. The Council ships maintained their rigid formation, apparently confident that their superior numbers and technology would make short work of any human resistance. Their ships were beautiful in a way that human vessels were not: elegant curves and flowing lines that spoke of advanced materials science and aesthetic sophistication. Each ship was easily twice the size of its human equivalent and bristled with weapons that had been refined over millennia of development. "Enemy fleet is hailing us," Rodriguez reported. "Standard surrender demand. They're ordering us to power down our weapons and prepare to be boarded." Chen checked her tactical display. The human fleet was still approaching, scattered across a wide front that made it difficult for the Council ships to concentrate their fire. More importantly, the human ships were accelerating far beyond what the Council expected was possible, closing the distance at a rate that was clearly causing confusion among the enemy formation. "Open a channel to the Council fleet," Chen ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the lead Council ship. The captain was a tall, elegant being with crystalline skin that refracted light in complex patterns. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that suggested highly advanced vocal cords. I am Fleet Commander Zelthara of the Galactic Council Enforcement Division. You are in violation of Resolution 4471 and will immediately surrender your vessels. This is your only warning. Chen stepped forward, making sure she was clearly visible on the transmission. Fleet Commander, I am Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth Coalition. I'm afraid we have a different perspective on the situation. The alien's crystalline features shifted in what might have been confusion. Your perspective is irrelevant. You have been given lawful orders by the legitimate authority of this galaxy. Comply or face the consequences. The problem with your position, Chen replied calmly, is that you've made a critical error in judgment. You see, the Galactic Council has apparently never encountered a species like humanity. You're used to dealing with civilizations that develop peacefully, that unite their homeworlds before venturing into space, that accept limitations and work within established frameworks. The tactical display showed that the human fleet had reached optimal engagement range. Around the galaxy, similar confrontations were taking place as human ships emerged from hiding places throughout Council space, having infiltrated their territory over the course of weeks using stealth technology that the aliens had never imagined possible. Humans, Chen continued, are different. We don't accept limitations. We don't respect authority simply because it claims to be legitimate. And we really don't like being told what we can and cannot do. Fleet Commander Zelthara's harmonics shifted to overtones of irritation. Your primitive aggression is exactly why containment is necessary. You will comply with Council authority or no, Chen interrupted. We won't. And now you're going to discover why that's your problem, not ours. She cut the transmission and immediately activated the ship's combat protocols. Around her, the bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, bringing weapons online and coordinating with the rest of the human fleet. The Council ships began their attack with weapons that should have reduced human vessels to scrap metal within seconds. Directed energy beams that could slice through asteroid fields struck human ships only to scatter harmlessly off adaptive armor plating. Projectile weapons that had never failed to penetrate enemy hulls bounced off reactive defensive systems that shouldn't have existed. The return fire from the human fleet was something the Council had never seen before. Instead of the crude kinetic weapons they expected, human ships unleashed a nightmare fusion of advanced technology and brutal practicality. Weapons that could track targets through hyperspace. Missiles that learned and adapted during flight. Energy beams that somehow grew stronger the longer they fired. The elegant Council formation began to disintegrate as ships found themselves under attack from directions that should have been impossible. Human vessels were appearing and disappearing throughout the battlefield, using their modified engines to achieve mobility that violated every known law of hyperspace physics. Fleet Commander Zelthara's ship shuddered under impacts from weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate its shields. The crystalline being's harmonics shifted to overtones of fear as it realized that the primitive humans had somehow developed technology that exceeded Council capabilities. This is impossible, Zelthara transmitted to its fleet. Humans have only had faster-than-light travel for 3 years. How can they possess such advanced weapons? The answer came from Chen's next transmission, broadcast on all frequencies. You made the mistake of assuming that technological advancement follows predictable patterns. Humans don't develop technology gradually over millennia like your species. When we're threatened, we innovate. When we're cornered, we adapt. When you try to cage us, we become something you never imagined possible. The battle was over within 30 minutes. Of the 68 Council ships that had entered human space, only 12 escaped to carry word of the defeat back to the Galactic Council. The rest were either destroyed or captured, their crews taken prisoner and their technology studied with the same ruthless efficiency that had characterized human development since the ultimatum. But the victory at Kepler Station was only the beginning. Across the galaxy, human ships were emerging from hiding places near every major Council world, carrying out simultaneous attacks that demonstrated the true scope of human preparation. The species that the Council had dismissed as primitive and disorganized had somehow managed to infiltrate their entire territory and position assets for a coordinated strike of unprecedented scope. As the Defiant began recovery operations to salvage Council technology and rescue survivors, Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The aliens had wanted to contain humanity, to force them into submission through economic pressure and military intimidation. Instead, they had provided humans with the greatest motivator in their species' history, an external threat that required their complete attention and unlimited innovation. The Galactic Council was about to discover what humans were really capable of when they stopped pretending to be civilized. Ambassador Thexera's 4 eyes darted between the holographic displays that filled the emergency session chamber, each one showing a different catastrophe unfolding across Council space. The elegant crystalline spire that had once represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization now felt like a tomb, its prismatic light casting shadows that seemed to writhe with the terror spreading through 47 different species. Sector 12 has gone completely dark, reported the Kethmori delegate, her mandibles clicking in a rhythm that betrayed barely controlled panic. The entire industrial complex at Vorthak Prime, 15 billion inhabitants, and we've lost all communication. The last transmission showed human ships appearing out of nowhere using some kind of impossible stealth technology. High Counselor Vayex's mental broadcasts had taken on overtones of desperation that no one had ever heard before. This is not possible. Our intelligence indicated that humans possessed fewer than 2,000 ships of marginal capability. The coordinated attacks we're witnessing would require a fleet of over 50,000 vessels with technology that surpasses our own. The truth was slowly becoming clear to every delegate in the chamber, though none wanted to acknowledge it. Humanity had not simply ignored the Council's ultimatum, they had used the 3-week preparation period to position themselves for the most devastating first strike in galactic history. While Council representatives had debated economic sanctions and enforcement protocols, human ships had somehow infiltrated every major star system in Council space. The reports from our surviving fleet commanders are disturbing, continued Thexera, her voice carefully controlled despite the terror she felt. Human weapons appeared to adapt during combat. Their ships move through hyperspace in ways that our physicists claim should tear them apart. And their tactics. She paused, accessing another data stream. They're targeting our military academies. This last revelation sent a wave of horror through the chamber. The humans weren't simply fighting a war, they were systematically destroying the Council's ability to train future military leaders. Every major educational institution that produced officers for Council fleets had been hit simultaneously, their facilities reduced to rubble and their faculty either dead or missing. They're also hitting our research stations, added the delegate from the ethereal dominion, their harmonic voice trembling with frequencies never before heard. Every facility working on advanced propulsion, weapons development, or xenobiology. They're not just winning battles, they're destroying our capacity to develop countermeasures. The tactical implications were staggering. In less than 72 hours, humanity had crippled the Council's military leadership, eliminated their research capabilities, and demonstrated technological superiority that should have taken centuries to develop. Worse still, the pattern of attacks suggested that humans had detailed intelligence about Council military structure, research programs, and strategic capabilities. High Counselor Vayex's mental voice carried undertones of a realization too horrible to fully accept. How long have they been watching us? The question hung in the chamber like a physical presence. If humans had been conducting surveillance operations throughout Council space for months or even years before their official first contact, it would explain their impossible knowledge of Council weaknesses. It would also mean that humanity had been preparing for war while presenting themselves as peaceful explorers. Incoming transmission from the Harmony Collective Fleet, announced a communications technician. They're requesting immediate evacuation from the Serenity system. The Harmony Collective had been among the few species to argue for peaceful contact with humanity. Their reaction to human military action would be crucial for maintaining any hope of Council unity. The transmission that appeared on the main display showed the Collective's fleet commander, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix. Honored Council, the being's voice was a symphony of harmonized frequencies. We must report complete tactical defeat. Human forces appeared within our defensive perimeter using technology that renders our sensors useless. They disabled our ships without destroying them, then, they did something unprecedented. Thexera felt her 4 hearts freeze. What did they do? They offered us terms for surrender. Not unconditional submission, actual negotiated terms that acknowledge our sovereignty while requiring us to withdraw from Council space. They treated us as equals in a way the Council never has. The implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. Humans weren't simply conquering Council territory, they were offering alternative allegiances to member species. The careful political structure that had maintained galactic peace for millennia was being systematically dismantled and replaced with something entirely new. Several collective fleets have already accepted human terms, the commander continued. In exchange for neutrality and non-interference, humans guarantee our territorial sovereignty and offer access to their advanced technology. They're not demanding submission, they're offering partnership. High Counselor Vayex's mental broadcasts took on overtones of rage. This is unacceptable. The Council cannot tolerate member species negotiating separate peace agreements with a hostile force. With respect, Counselor, the Harmony Collective Commander replied, humans are only hostile to species that threaten them. Those who approach them peacefully find them surprisingly reasonable. Perhaps the Council's assumption that they are inherently aggressive was incorrect. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. The political structure of the galaxy was collapsing in real time as member species began to realize that they had alternatives to Council membership. Humanity was offering something the Council never had, the right to remain independent while still participating in galactic civilization. Emergency report from the Zilithian outer colonies, Thexera announced, accessing her people's military networks. Human diplomatic vessels have arrived offering the same terms, neutrality in exchange for non-interference and technology sharing. Our colonial governors are seriously considering acceptance. This was the nightmare scenario that no one had anticipated. Humans weren't trying to replace the Council with their own empire, they were destroying the very concept of galactic government. They were demonstrating that independent species could cooperate without submitting to a central authority. This cannot continue, the Kethmori delegate declared, her mandibles clicking with desperate determination. We must rally our remaining forces for a decisive counterattack. Show the galaxy that the Council still has power. With what forces? Asked the delegate from the Vertex Consortium. Preliminary reports suggest we've lost 60% of our military capability in the first wave of attacks. The survivors are scattered across hundreds of systems with no way to coordinate effectively. The truth was becoming undeniable. The Council's military strategy had been based on the assumption that their opponents would follow conventional tactical doctrine. Humans had instead used their technological advantages to attack from multiple directions simultaneously, creating chaos that prevented any organized response. High Counselor Vayex's mental voice carried overtones of desperate calculation. We still possess strategic weapons that humans cannot counter. Planet killers, star destroyers, reality bombs. If we cannot defeat them conventionally, we must be prepared to use extreme measures. The suggestion was met with horrified silence. The Council had developed weapons of mass destruction over the millennia, but they had never been used against a spacefaring species. The ethical implications of destroying entire worlds to stop human expansion would shatter the moral foundation that held the Council together. You're talking about genocide, Thexera said quietly. The destruction of billions of innocent lives to stop a species that has offered peaceful terms to everyone who doesn't threaten them. They are the ones who started this war, Vayex replied, but his mental voice carried undertones of uncertainty. They rejected legitimate Council authority and responded with unprecedented violence. Did they? Asked the delegate from the ethereal dominion. Or did we start this war when we attempted to force them into submission without negotiation? The question struck at the heart of the Council's growing crisis of legitimacy. The more they learned about human tactics and objectives, the clearer it became that humanity was fighting a defensive war against what they perceived as an attempt at subjugation. The Council had assumed that their authority was natural and unquestionable, but humans had proven that assumption false. Incoming priority transmission, announced the communications technician. It's from Earth itself. The main display activated to show a human woman in what appeared to be a simple office setting. She looked calm and professional, as if she were conducting a routine business meeting rather than addressing the leaders of a galactic civilization in the middle of a war. Honorable members of the Galactic Council, I am Secretary General Maria Santos of the United Earth Coalition. I'm addressing you today to clarify humanity's position and offer terms for ending the current hostilities. Thexera found herself leaning forward despite her fear. This was the first direct communication from Earth since the war began, and Secretary General Santos didn't look like someone who was bluffing. First, let me dispel some misconceptions. Humanity did not reject Council authority because we are inherently violent or uncooperative. We rejected it because your ultimatum was delivered without negotiation, consultation, or acknowledgement of our legitimate interests. You demanded submission, not cooperation. Santos paused, her expression remaining perfectly calm. Second, you appear to have seriously underestimated our capabilities. This is understandable, most species develop technology gradually over millennia. Humans are different. When threatened with extinction or subjugation, we innovate at rates that even we find surprising. The casual way she discussed human technological superiority was somehow more terrifying than any military threat could have been. Santos spoke as if the complete military defeat of the Council was simply a fact to be acknowledged, not a victory to be celebrated. Third, and, most importantly, humanity has no interest in conquering or ruling the galaxy. We want to be left alone to develop as we choose, and we want the same freedom for every other species. The Council's insistence on universal authority is the problem, not humanity's expansion. High Counselor Vax found his mental voice. What are your terms? Santos smiled, and somehow the expression was more frightening than her words had been. Simple. The Council dissolves itself and ceases all attempts to claim authority over independent species. Each world and system governs itself according to its own preferences. Those who wish to cooperate do so freely. Those who prefer isolation are left alone. That would be chaos, Vax protested. Without central authority, the galaxy will descend into constant warfare between competing species. Will it? Santos asked. Or will it simply develop differently than you expect? Humanity believes that freedom and voluntary cooperation are more stable than imposed authority. We're willing to stake our future on that belief. The transmission continued with detailed proposals for transitional arrangements, technology sharing agreements, and conflict resolution mechanisms. It was clearly the work of sophisticated political minds that had thought through every aspect of galactic reorganization. You have 72 hours to consider our terms, Santos concluded. After that, we will assume that the Council has chosen to continue hostilities. I should mention that our current military actions represent less than 10% of our actual capability. We have been hoping to resolve this situation without revealing the full extent of human military potential. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in absolute silence. The threat was delivered so calmly that it took several moments for its implications to sink in. If the devastating attacks of the past 3 days represented only 10% of human capability, then, the Council was facing an enemy that could literally exterminate galactic civilization if they chose to do so. This is impossible, whispered the Kethmori delegate. No species can develop such overwhelming power in only 3 years. But, Thexera was beginning to understand the truth that would reshape everything the galaxy thought it knew about intelligent life. Humans weren't bound by the same evolutionary patterns that constrained other species. They were something entirely new, a form of intelligence that could adapt and innovate at rates that seemed to violate natural law. The Galactic Council had attempted to contain humanity, believing them to be just another young species that needed guidance. Instead, they had awakened something that challenged every assumption about how civilizations developed. They had learned, too late, that humanity's response to threats was not submission or negotiation, but transformation into something more dangerous than their enemies could imagine. As emergency sessions continued throughout the night and reports of human victories poured in from across the galaxy, one thing became clear: the age of the Galactic Council was ending. Whether it would be replaced by chaos, tyranny, or something unprecedented remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again.